Hi, ladies. For many years now, I've done a word of intent for the year. My very first one was faithfulness. In my naivety, I wanted to be so faithful to God that year. But I realized at the end of the year just how unfaithful I really was and just how faithful God remained despite my unfaithfulness. And that year is something that I'll never forget. God wanted me to remember his faithfulness, which is so much more reliable than my own. God is so faithful. We see it so much throughout the Bible, and he longs for us to remember his faithfulness. Take Joshua 4 1 through 7, for example. Talks about the 12 memorial stones from the Jordan. When all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man," and commanded them, saying, "Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over to you and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight." Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in the time to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?' Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over the Jordan, and the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." So God had the Israelites set up stones as a memorial to remind themselves and share with their children what God had done. You see, God knows we're forgetful and we need reminders. When our faith seems weak, we need to remember his faithfulness. God set up lots of ways to remind his people of his provision and faithfulness. And this wasn't the only time or way God set up rhythms or rituals to remember his faithfulness. Even with the feast, they were there to remind his people in regards to Passover. Exodus 12:14 states, "This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast." Passover and the other feast days were set up as yearly reminders. The Sabbath was also set up as a weekly reminder of his provision in our lives. Exodus 31:12 through 13. "Above all, you shall keep my Sabbath, for this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you." Even when Jesus comes down to earth and becomes the fulfillment of Passover for us, and the institute of the Lord's Supper is set in place to remember him and all he has done for us, Luke 22:19 says, "And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" So God knows how forgetful we are and how much we need to remember, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. Have any of you seen that movie, The War Room? I just love that movie. And in one particular scene, we see a wall of remembrance that Miss Clara has in her house that contains all of God's answered prayers in her life, and it encourages her when life isn't going so well, and she looks back at it and she remembers God is still in control. So that wall inspired me to set up my own memorial stones, so to speak, in my own life as a way of remembering God's faithfulness. It took me a long time to figure out how best to do that, but I finally came up with an idea, and it's this bulletin board behind me, and it's where I put photos, memorabilia, and such just from answered prayers in my life, all reminders of God's faithfulness in my own life and his provision for me. And I ended up having so many that now they also fill up a box as well. Whatever we pay attention to gets magnified in our life. Like when you buy a new red sports car and now all you see are red sports cars on the road. Same is true with God. The more we see God's provision, the more we continue to see God's provision. So I encourage you to have reminders of God's faithfulness in your own life. But don't just stop there. Not only are we to have these reminders, but we are also to be these reminders. 1 Peter 2:5 says, "Put yourselves like living stones, are built up as a spiritual house to be holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ." We ourselves are to be living stones like the memorial stones put up to remind or show people of God's provision in our own lives and point them to Him by how we live our lives. So I encourage you ladies to be your own memorial stone, a living stone that points people to God and His faithfulness in your life. Christy McClellan tells us in her podcast Pearls that Jewish people, when they look back and remember God's faithfulness, it actually helps give them the courage to go forward. So may you remember God's faithfulness and also have the courage to go forward. God bless, ladies. Bye.